Hey guys, this is Crazy Sean DX and welcome back to Praise Appraisal, where I determine if something is worth the praise or not worth the praise. Today we're going to be looking at Devil May Cry for the PS4, or originally PS2. Is it worth all the praise that it's gotten back then? Well, let's find out. Devil May Cry has had a very interesting development cycle. Originally starting off as Resident Evil 4, it would have the player control a man named Tony as he fought monsters with his superhuman abilities. However, Capcom opted against keeping it as Resident Evil 4 for fear that it'd stray too far from the survival horror genre that Resident Evil has always been about. Still, Capcom saw promise in the game and had it retooled to be its own thing, and thus, Devil May Cry was born. Once it was released, it got a ton of critical praise, being considered one of the best games of all time. However, similarly to Sonic Adventure, the re-releases of the games saw the scores get kinda lower as time went by, largely due to it aging in a number of areas. But does that really mean the game is bad? Well, that's what we're here to find out, so this is Devil May Friggin' Cry. That doesn't sound right at all. So the game begins with Dante at his job, named Devil May Cry, as a demon hunting service. In comes a woman known as Trish, who in DMC5 looks like she was modeled after Charlotte Flair, who...
Are you really the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta?
Time to go to work, guys.
This is literally 12-year-old edgelord's fanfiction. Look, I'm not gonna knock Hideki Kamiya all that much. I mean, he really pulled off the Union Jack glove pretty well. But a lot of this game screams edgelord! Not to mention the voice acting can be pretty bad at times, especially with Trish. I'll get to those moments in a bit though. As for the edginess, just take a look at this cutscene and try to tell me that this doesn't scream emo edgelord wet dream of edginess. Ow, the friggin' edge! No joke, I somehow managed to cut myself. I'm not even sure how it happened. Anyway, Trish has come to Dante for help in stopping the Demon Lord Mundus. Not Mundus, Mundus, from escaping the underworld. And so they head to an island where he's said to escape from. Oh, and Mundus apparently killed Dante's family, I guess? This is never really brought up in the third game, by the way. And so the game begins, and you can clearly see how it aged. The graphics, for starters, are the most obvious part of the game that aged poorly. The character models just look so poor, with facial expressions just looking so friggin' off. Hell, there are some facial expressions that can't even be properly made as a result of it. However, the gameplay does make up for it, with the game kinda helping the hack and slash genre get put on the map of gaming. It honestly feels so satisfying defeating all the enemies, especially as you get new weapons to beat enemies with each more powerful than the last. At least in the case of the guns, anyway. There's also a sort of lock-on feature that allows you to target specific enemies, making it easier to go after the enemies and to focus on one at a time as best as you can. However, there's one major factor about the gameplay overall. This game will kick your ass. Yeah, I've played this before, and I gotta say that normal mode is way too much for me personally. I ended up switching to easy auto mode, which allows the player to not have to do various button inputs for combos. But it also ends up locking out the player out of the harder difficulty settings on that file, so even if you do get to do New Game Plus with all the weapons you acquire beforehand, you won't get to make it harder for the unlockable content in question, such as the ability to play as Dante's father Sparta, even if it's just really a reskin of sorts. So you have to make the choice of being stuck in a set difficulty but being able to have an easier time playing a game, or have the option to make it harder on yourself but also struggle quite a bit. It's honestly something that I don't like because you shouldn't have to be punished for not being as good at games as other people, in all honesty. Thankfully, Kamiya has learned from this with Bayonetta, another one of his projects that he's worked on. It just sucks that Sega couldn't and wouldn't fund the sequel though. There's also a lot of puzzle-solving elements that were likely left over from when it was developed as a Resident Evil game, with you having to find set items to use to progress further in the mansion. Speaking of items, enemies and some environmental objects can give the player red orbs, which honestly looks like they are having the worst time in the toilet. And they're used as currency at specific statues to upgrade your weapons as well as yourself, and even buy items such as healing items. However, the items being used, namely ones like the Vital Star, apparently end up hurting your end on mission rank, so you have to think carefully about whether or not to use items if you want to try for an S rank in the mission. Speaking of, there are apparently some enemies missing from easy mode altogether, and I only noticed it in mission 5 specifically, as I got those Scissor Reaper enemies instead of a lone Shadow Beast, so you're technically gonna miss out on specific enemies too. Again, why punish a player for not being that good at games? There's also the worst offender of the game, in my opinion, being the fixed camera. For those that don't know, Resident Evil used to have a fixed camera system with tank controls, meaning that when the camera changes, you would still be going in the direction you were already going despite holding the left stick in the same direction as before. This was brought over into Devil May Cry, and I honestly hate it. It caused some trouble in my first playthrough with bosses, and I tend to change the direction of the left stick out of habit when the camera changes, even if I'm still heading in the same direction. Okay, just gotta bring the soul to... Camera, could you... Oh, okay, look, camera, I swear to... Camera! I'm just gonna say, the fixed camera shtick here just doesn't work for action games. There's also the boss battles, which for the most part aren't that bad, but again, I have a very rough time in my first playthrough on normal mode, and found myself having to rely on the game's power-up state for Dante being known as Devil Trigger. I feel like this should be used as a last resort, but instead it feels more like a requirement to beat certain enemies, especially the bosses. To be fair though, some bosses also adapt to going against Devil Trigger, so that's fine, I guess. Speaking of the bosses, we got Phantom, Nello Angelo, Griffin, Nello Angelo but without his helmet, Griffin, Phantom. You know, for such a pioneer in gaming, there really wasn't a very diverse group of boss battles, huh? I will say that Phantom is probably my favorite, based on the fact that it's literally just a giant tarantula that has a scorpion tail in his thorax. That's just terrifying, but I kinda like it a lot. Either way, I feel a bit better about playing this on easy mode because I was managing to have fun with it. Simply put, playing it on easy mode is like, oh gee, I am enjoying this game and having the fun. While on normal mode, it's like... So I think that's really all I can say, but I do want to kind of go over the story, and if you don't want to be spoiled for the story, click the time that pops up here to skip ahead to where I sum up the game, basically. I know the game is over 20 years old, but I will not judge you if you've never played the game and still don't want to know the story just in case. I will judge you if you hate gay people, though. So, there admittedly isn't much story to discuss, as most of the game is just hack and slash combat and puzzle solving. Basically, it turns out that Mundus is the guy that killed Dante's mother and brother, even though Devil May Cry 3 seemed to show things differently as far as I know. Nevertheless, it turned out that Dante's brother Virgil didn't actually die, but was made a servant to Mundus as Nello Angelo, who Dante didn't even recognize when his face was clearly shown, even though they're considered twin brothers. Still, Dante beat him and caused him to disappear, leaving behind his amulet that's just like Dante's, thus confirming Virgil's death. Until Devil May Cry 5 retconned that. What is with this series retconning stuff? Upon friggin' Nightmare, which by the way is the worst boss to deal with in my opinion, especially on normal mode, this happens. You see that? See what I meant when I meant the graphics weren't all that great, along with the voice acting? It just looks like Trish's eyes are trying to escape her skull, and the voice acting in general, not just Trish's, is just painful at times and a bit try-hard in other aspects. Anyway, Dante defeats Nightmare but saves Trish from a falling rock, and when Trish asks why he did that, this happens.
Because you look like my mother.
Dante wants to bang his mom, Creepazoid, Creepazoid. Of course, he assures her that she's nothing like his mom and leaves her to rot. Almost immediately afterwards, though, she's locked up by Mundus and Dante cares for her now, I guess. No, she's not even fully cuffed. How are you not saying that, Dante? As Mundus attempts the final blow, Trish sacrifices herself and saves Dante, which leads to a two-phase final showdown against Mundus. First phase being that Dante's a flying devil man with a devil trigger that turns him into a freaking dragon of badassery, and the second phase being the only real place I died in this easy mode game. I have failed you all. After beating Mundus, Dante laments over failing to save Trish.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Ow! The... Jeez.
This was my mother's. Now I'm giving it to you. My father's also here now.
I am entirely convinced that the writers just hired internet forum users to do their job, the kinds that run the edgy fanfiction, you know the ones. Dante has to escape the island, and Mundus has somehow survived with one last showdown, again, between the two, and oh no. Mundus, you don't look so good. You honestly look better in the reboot in both forms, though. However, Dante can't seem to beat Mundus, but Trish Ex Machina shows up somehow being alive with no explanation given as to how, lending Dante her power to deliver the final blow.
Trish!
Dante lusts for his own mom, Creepazoid, Creepazoid. Dante and Trish then manage to escape via biplane, you know, the one in the mansion that was on display and shouldn't work at all, as Trish then declares herself Dante's sidekick for his business. Way to dismiss your own abilities as a demon, miss. I'm a clone of my lover's mom. Oh, I'm not kidding. Mundus created her to look like Dante's mom so that he could lure Dante to his doom. Dante's business is now renamed to Devil Never Cry, which I'm pretty sure was also retconned, as Trish and Dante set out to stop another demon problem. And that was Devil May Cry. So, how much praise do I think this is worth anyway? Honestly, I had a far better time playing this on easy mode than I did normal, even if it locks me out of unlockable content. Although, like I said, there's a new game plus that gives you all the weapons you've gotten over the course of the game, so it does make sure it gets somewhat easier for harder difficulties. However, if you're gonna play this on normal mode, there's no shame in getting some practice in with easy mode. Just know that you'll have to start a new file entirely if you want to go to normal, and that you'll not have all the weapons from the start anymore. Either way, the action can be fun, even if the graphics can be The game has aged for the most part, but it's still, honestly, a pretty great time, and it's worth trying out to learn to appreciate that which paved the way for so many other games. Well, that wasn't so bad. Though there is one valid reason that I have as to why I dreaded this review. It means I eventually have to look at the sequel at some point.